Blessed are the eyes that see what you see. For I tell you, many kings and prophets have desired to see what you see, and have not seen it. To hear what you hear, and have not heard it. I thank you, Father, for hiding these things from the learned and the wise, and revealing them to the innocent and the simple.
Explosive wildfire has Santa Barbara County under a state of emergency tonight. At least 4,000 acres have gone up. Hundreds of residents have been forced from their homes. More than a dozen major fires are scorching the west, now howling through Santa Barbara's coastal canyons.
Fueled by the notorious sundowner winds, the fires surrounding Santa Barbara exploded overnight, doubling in size to 4,000 acres. 90-degree temperatures in the canyons, combined with 50-mile-an-hour winds, sent the fires whipping down mountains and onto the main highway, causing road closures and sending firemen to take cover. 400 people were evacuated. This area has not had a fire in nearly 70 years. Santa Barbara Fire Chief Eric Peterson says the state's 5-year drought has left the area especially vulnerable.
The fuels out there are drought stressed. There's a lot of tree mortality out there that makes fire behavior worse. So the drought is making a already pretty volatile situation not any better.
Over 1,200 firefighters are battling the so-called Sherpa fire in high heat and difficult chest-deep canyon terrain.
Tankers have been dropping retardant on these bone-dry hillsides ahead of the fire so that the flames don't reach nearby homes.
Temperatures topping 100 degrees and low humidity have fueled fires in New Mexico and Arizona. The Doghead fire in New Mexico has destroyed 45 structures with zero containment.
North Korea may have doubled its number of nuclear weapons in just the last year and a half. That's according to a report from the Institute for Science and International Security in Washington. The London Daily Mirror reports the group estimates that Kim Jong-un could have added 6 or more weapons by expanding his country's nuclear production. North Korea promised in 2013 to start up all of its nuclear facilities again and said last month that it will build up its nuclear weapons capability.
The attack by Russian fighter bombers on American-backed opposition forces appeared to be deliberate and to ignore repeated U.S. warnings. It happened in southern Syria, where 2 Su-34s bombed opposition forces, some of them trained and equipped by the Pentagon as part of the war against ISIS. When the American-run command center, which tracks Russian flights in yellow up on that big screen, realized what had happened, it called the Russian command center in Syria on a hotline set up specifically to avoid incidents like this, demanding the planes cease fire. 2 American F-18 jet fighters were dispatched to provide air cover for the troops on the ground as they tried to evacuate their casualties. By the time the F-18s arrived, the Russian planes were headed away, although still close enough to see. But when the F-18s broke away to refuel, the Russians returned for a second bombing run. Another call went out to the Russian command center in Syria, demanding the planes wave off. And the crew of an airborne command post tried to contact the Russian pilots directly, but got no response. The Su-34s conducted another bombing run, leaving a small number of opposition fighters dead on the ground. It's been nearly 9 months since Russia intervened in Syria's civil war, and although Russian planes have flown close to American aircraft before, this was the most serious incident between the two militaries.
Russia has strongly warned Washington against attacking Syrian army positions, saying it would fuel turmoil across the entire region. President Vladimir Putin's spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, said an attempt to topple the Syrian government would not help a successful fight against terrorism. He made the statement after more than 50 U.S. State Department diplomats called for targeted airstrikes against Syrian forces. Washington has deployed its special forces in Syria to help what it calls the moderate opposition. It has also been conducting airstrikes against Daesh since 2014. The U.S. military deployment has been criticized by the Syrian government, Russia, and Iran. Opponents of the U.S. intervention in Syria say Washington is not serious in its fight against terrorists and is using the anti-government forces for political gain.
Extremists have listed U.S. Air Force facilities in South Korea and South Korean citizens as new targets. They published the location of the facilities as well as personal information of the citizens. According to a South Korean intelligence agency, the information is a part of a package released by extremists through an instant messaging system. It specifies the location of 77 Air Force bases of NATO and the U.S., as well as personal information of citizens in 21 countries. South Korea's National Intelligence Service has warned the U.S. Air Force in South Korea and relevant institutions. South Korean police are also strengthening security measures to ensure the safety of the citizens whose information was included in the package.
Meanwhile, the U.S. Pacific Fleet has announced it is deploying more vessels to Eastern Asia. There are now 2 U.S. aircraft carrier groups in Asia. One is taking part in the military exercises between the U.S., Japan, and India. The other is in Yokosuka in Japan. Analysts say the continuing U.S. military buildup is a threat to the region.
A new round of heavy rainfall has pounded the middle and lower reaches of Yangtze River in Jiangxi province, killing 2 people and leaving 2 missing. The rains affected more than 940,000 people, including 58,000 who need to be relocated. About 63,000 hectares of farmland was damaged, with losses amounting up to 750 million yuan. Another 12,000 locals from the province's Jingdezhen city were evacuated due to waterlogging, and transportation was also hindered, with highways affected and flights cancelled. The province has enacted emergency measures to counter the extreme weather and also issued an orange alert for flooding in the local Changjiang River.
Turkish border guards have opened fire on Syrian refugees attempting to cross the border into Turkey. At least 9 people have been killed. The victims, most of them women and children, were members of one family. 8 others were injured in the shooting. The refugees were reportedly fleeing from fighting in the city of Jarablus in Aleppo Governorate.
People across the Southwest are enduring a miserable Monday after Sunday temperatures broke records and soared above 115 degrees. And forecasts for Southeast California and portions of Arizona.
The record 115, expecting to hit 118.
The unbearable heat has many turning to social media, posting photos of the boiling hot temperature readings on their car thermometers as well as their cell phones.
We don't have earthquakes, tornadoes, or hurricanes, but the heat is our disaster.
In Phoenix, Arizona, this 25-year-old Anthony Catella died Saturday, hiking in the extreme heat with a friend. They ran out of water. Then, early Sunday morning, a 28-year-old woman became unresponsive while mountain biking with friends. Firefighters managed to rescue her, but she died at the hospital. The weather's deadly reality even has children paying attention to the warning signs.
When you're dehydrated, your head starts hurting, then you can't do anything. But when you drink water, that prevents from you getting a headache.
Triple-digit heat in Phoenix forced some airlines to delay incoming flights Sunday because at 120 degrees, the air is so thin it creates lift problems for airplanes. A heat wave from Southern California to Missouri is bearing down on more than 50 million Americans.
We're still looking at above normal temperatures potentially right through the end of the month.
On top of that, raging wildfires. More than a dozen large infernos are now burning across 6 states, including a fire in New Mexico, where at least 24 homes have been lost. Flames have scorched nearly 2 million acres this year already, compared to only 500,000 at the same time last year.
A protest by Mexican teachers in the state of Oaxaca has taken an ugly turn. At least 6 people have been killed and more than 100 others injured in shootings by unknown assailants. The shootings occurred as police were engaged in violent clashes with a crowd of protesters. Officials say that a police officer is among the dead. riot police fired tear gas to disperse demonstrators who had blocked a highway in the town of Asuncion, Nochistion. The teachers are outraged at the government's education reform plan, which seeks to end the practice of inheriting or selling teaching positions. They're also furious about last weekend's arrest of 2 union leaders. Federal prosecutors accused the union leaders of money laundering and funding the protests.
Moving on, the number of displaced people across the globe has hit a new record. 65.3 million people were uprooted last year. According to figures released by the UN Refugee Agency on World Refugee Day, the number of people displaced worldwide rose by 5.8 million through 2015. The UNHCR says this is the first time that the 60 million threshold has been crossed. The UN blames conflict and persecution for an unprecedented global displacement crisis. It also says a rise in xenophobia and anti-refugee political sentiment has strained the will to resettle the displaced population. According to the UNHCR, 1 out of every 113 people on the planet is now either internally displaced or a refugee.